Riley Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead and squeezed through the narrow ventilation shaft. Another day, another busted air filter in the palace's endless maze of corridors. She had been working maintenance on the Imperial Station for 6 months now, and honestly, the pay was decent. The aliens were strange, sure, but they mostly ignored the human workers. That suited Riley just fine. She checked her scanner and frowned. The malfunction was coming from somewhere past this next junction, which according to her map led to, oh no, the Royal Wing. Riley's supervisor had been crystal clear during orientation: stay away from the Royal Wing. The Emperor doesn't like interruptions. But the air circulation system for half the station was failing, and somebody had to fix it. Riley made her decision and crawled forward. The shaft opened up suddenly, and before she could stop herself, she tumbled out onto a polished marble floor. The sound echoed like thunder in the massive chamber. She looked up slowly, her heart pounding. Dozens of tall, crystalline aliens stared down at her from elevated seats arranged in a semicircle. At the center sat the largest throne she had ever seen, and on it lounged Emperor Vorith himself. He was even more intimidating in person than in the holographic broadcasts. His skin shimmered with an iridescent purple glow, and his 4 eyes studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I'm so sorry, Riley stammered, scrambling to her feet. The ventilation system, it's broken, and I was trying to find the source of the... A human? One of the council members leaned forward, their voice dripping with amusement. In the throne room? Emperor Vorith raised one long-fingered hand, and the chamber fell silent. How did you bypass the security fields, little creature? Riley's mind was racing. She could feel waves of something washing over her, like invisible currents in the air. And then she heard it, not with her ears, but somehow inside her head. A voice, deep and resonant, speaking words that weren't being said aloud. Curious. The human appears genuinely terrified. Perhaps we should simply have her removed rather than... I can hear your thoughts, Riley blurted out before she could stop herself. The effect was immediate. The entire council burst into laughter. It wasn't cruel laughter, exactly, but it was the kind of laughter adults give when a child says something absurd. Emperor Vorith's expression shifted to something that might have been a smile on his alien features. You can hear my thoughts. The Emperor's actual voice boomed through the chamber, followed by another wave of laughter from the council. Tell me, little human, are you aware that telepathy is the rarest gift in the known universe? That only the most ancient and evolved species possess such abilities? Riley felt her cheeks burning. I know how it sounds, but I swear I just heard you thinking about whether to remove me or... Enough. The Emperor waved his hand dismissively, though his eyes sparkled with amusement. You have provided entertainment for what was becoming a tediously boring session. For that, I suppose I should thank you. But Riley could hear it again, that voice in her head. It was coming from the Emperor, she was certain of it now. She shows no signs of telepathic training. Humans aren't even on the list of species with psionic potential. This is clearly desperation or madness. You're thinking that I'm either desperate or crazy, Riley said quietly. And you're wondering why a species like humans would even be allowed on your station when we don't have any psionic potential. The laughter stopped. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. Emperor Vorith sat up straighter on his throne, his 4 eyes narrowing. The council members exchanged glances, their crystalline faces reflecting concern. What did you say? The Emperor's voice had lost its amused tone. Riley swallowed hard. I said I heard you thinking about humans not having psionic potential. And also you're worried about something. Something about the outer systems. There's trouble brewing, and you don't know who to trust. The silence in the throne room was absolute. Riley could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She watched as Emperor Vorith slowly rose from his throne, his towering form casting a long shadow across the chamber. He descended the steps, each footfall echoing, until he stood directly in front of her. This is impossible, he said softly, and Riley heard the thought that followed, unless it isn't. Emperor Vorith circled Riley slowly, studying her like she was some kind of puzzle he couldn't solve. The council members had gone completely silent, their earlier amusement replaced by something else. Confusion, maybe. Or concern. You claim to hear thoughts, the Emperor said, his voice measured and careful. Perhaps you simply made a lucky guess. Anyone could speculate that an emperor worries about his territories. Riley shook her head. It wasn't a guess. I heard you. Clear as day. You were thinking about the Outer Rim colonies, specifically the mining stations near the 7th sector. And there's someone named Draven who keeps sending you reports, but you're not sure if you believe them anymore. The Emperor stopped moving. Several council members gasped. One of them, an elderly alien with silver markings across his crystalline face, stood up abruptly. Your Majesty, the human should not know that name. High Chancellor Draven's involvement in the Outer Territories is classified information. Riley felt another wave of thoughts hit her, this time from multiple directions. The council members were projecting, probably trying to read her mind the way they would with each other. It felt like gentle pressure against her skull, uncomfortable but not painful. I sense nothing from her, one council member announced. Her mind is different. Chaotic, like all human minds, but there's no telepathic signature. Then how? Another council member demanded. How could she possibly know these things? Emperor Vorith held up his hand for silence. He stared at Riley with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Tell me something else. Something no one in this room knows. Something I've never spoken aloud. Riley closed her eyes and concentrated. The thoughts were everywhere, swirling around her like currents in water. Most of them were jumbled and unclear, but the Emperor's thoughts had a distinct quality to them. Deeper, somehow. More focused. And then she heard it. A memory, rising to the surface of his mind. You're afraid of the dark, Riley said softly. When you were young, before you became Emperor, your family was attacked. You hid in a storage compartment for 3 days with no light, no food, just waiting and hoping they wouldn't find you. You survived, but ever since then, you can't sleep without at least some light in your chambers. No one knows this because an Emperor can't show weakness. The color drained from Vorith's face, if that was even possible for his species. He took a step back, and for the first time since Riley had fallen into the throne room, he looked genuinely shaken. That's impossible, he breathed. I've never told anyone that. Not my advisors, not my family, not even my previous wives. That memory was locked away in the deepest parts of my mind. The council erupted into chaos. Everyone was talking at once, some demanding explanations, others insisting it was some kind of trick. Riley stood in the center of it all, feeling overwhelmed and honestly a little scared. She hadn't meant to reveal something so personal. It had just been right there in his thoughts, and he'd asked her to prove herself. Silence. Emperor Vorith's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The council immediately quieted. He turned to his chief advisor, the silver-marked alien who had spoken earlier. Counselor Brent, scan her again. Use the deep probes. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. Brent approached Riley cautiously, as if she might explode at any moment. He placed his long fingers near her temples, not quite touching, and Riley felt that pressure in her skull increase dramatically. It was like someone was rifling through filing cabinets in her brain, searching for something specific. After a long moment, Brent pulled back, looking confused and slightly disturbed. Your Majesty, this is unlike anything I've encountered in 40 years of telepathic service. The human female isn't telepathic in any conventional sense. She has no psionic field, no mental projection capabilities, no ability to shield or broadcast thoughts. Then how is she reading minds? Vorith demanded. Brent hesitated. She's not reading minds, exactly. It's more like, she's listening to quantum echoes. Every thought creates a subtle disturbance in quantum fields. Most species can't perceive these disturbances at all. Those of us with telepathic abilities perceive them as organized information that we can send and receive intentionally. But this human, somehow, her brain processes these quantum fluctuations as if they were audible sounds. She's not telepathic. She's something else entirely. Riley blinked. I'm sorry, quantum what now? I just hear voices in my head sometimes. I always thought everyone could do that, until I mentioned it to my supervisor a few weeks ago and she looked at me like I was crazy. You've been hearing thoughts for weeks. Emperor Vorith leaned forward. And you said nothing? I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe it was stress, or bad food from the cafeteria, or something in the air filters. I'm a maintenance worker, not a scientist. How was I supposed to know I was picking up alien telepathy? The Emperor stared at her for another long moment, then did something Riley never expected. He laughed. Not the mocking laughter from before, but genuine, almost surprised laughter. A human, he said, shaking his head. Of all the species in the galaxy, a human develops a completely unique form of thought perception. The universe has a sense of humor after all. He straightened up and addressed the council. This session is adjourned. Riley Chen, you will remain at the palace as my guest until we understand the full extent of your abilities. Counselor Brent, arrange suitable quarters for her. And someone please fix whatever ventilation problem brought her here in the first place. As guards gently escorted Riley toward the exit, she heard one final thought from the Emperor, clear and sharp: this changes everything. The guest quarters were nicer than any place Riley had ever lived. The bed was huge, the bathroom had water that actually ran hot, and there was a window overlooking the station's central garden. But nice as it was, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being kept under observation. Which, to be fair, she probably was. For the first 3 days, scientists and telepathic specialists came in and out, running tests and asking endless questions. They scanned her brain, measured her responses, and made her listen to volunteers thinking specific thoughts in controlled environments. By the end of it, Riley was exhausted and homesick for her cramped maintenance workers' bunk. On the 4th morning, something changed. Instead of scientists, 2 royal guards arrived and escorted her to a private dining room. Emperor Vorith sat at a modest table, looking far less intimidating in simple robes than he had on his throne. He gestured to the seat across from him. Please, sit. I thought you might be tired of being treated like a laboratory specimen. Riley sat down cautiously. Is that what this is? The part where you tell me I'm too dangerous to let go? Vorith actually smiled. No. This is the part where I apologize for the rudeness of my scientific staff and offer you breakfast. I hope human food is acceptable. My chefs did their best. The spread before them did look like human food, or at least a close approximation. Scrambled eggs, toast, something that resembled bacon. Riley's stomach growled despite her nervousness. Go ahead, Vorith encouraged. I've already eaten. Well, I've consumed my nutritional supplement. Your species' relationship with food is fascinating, by the way. You actually enjoy the process of eating. Riley took a bite of toast and nodded. Yeah, pretty much. Food is like a big deal where I'm from. Family dinners, celebrations, comfort food when you're sad. It's not just fuel for us. She heard his thought before he spoke it. How simple. How wonderfully uncomplicated. Over the next few weeks, these private meals became routine. At first, Riley thought the Emperor was still studying her, trying to understand her strange ability. But gradually, she realized something else was happening. He was lonely. Desperately, crushingly lonely in a way she hadn't expected from the most powerful being in the galaxy. Can I ask you something? Riley said one evening as they shared dinner. Why do you keep inviting me here? I mean, your scientists have all the data they need, right? Vorith was quiet for a moment, staring into his cup of whatever his species drank. You're the first person in a very long time who can't lie to me, Riley. Do you understand what that means? Riley thought about it. I guess everyone around you is always trying to hide their real thoughts. Exactly. Vorith leaned back in his chair. My telepathic council members are trained from childhood to shield their true feelings. They project only what they want me to hear. My non-telepathic subjects fear me too much to speak honestly. And my advisors, well, they all have their own agendas. But you? You hear everything. You can't help but tell me the truth because you know I can't hide anything from you either. That sounds exhausting, Riley said honestly. It is. Vorith's thought echoed what he said aloud, and Riley heard the weariness in both. I've ruled for 37 years. I've made decisions that affected billions of lives. I've prevented wars and started others when necessary. But I can't remember the last time I had a genuine conversation with someone who wasn't trying to manipulate me. Riley set down her fork. Is that why you asked me about Earth yesterday? You weren't just being polite. Tell me more, Vorith said, leaning forward. About your planet. About how humans connect with each other. So Riley did. She told him about her family back on Earth, about her little brother who wanted to be an astronaut, about her mom's terrible cooking that everyone pretended to love anyway. She described movie nights and birthday parties, neighbors helping each other move furniture, strangers holding doors open for each other. We're not special, Riley explained. We don't have telepathy or faster-than-light travel that we invented ourselves or anything like that. But we've got each other, you know? When things get hard, we reach out. We help. Even when it's inconvenient. Vorith listened to every word, and Riley could hear his thoughts processing everything she said. He was fascinated by the concept of casual kindness, of people helping each other without political calculation or expectation of reward. Your Majesty, Riley said carefully one evening. Can I tell you what I've been hearing from your council members? His expression darkened slightly. I assume nothing good. Councillor Brent is loyal to you, completely. His thoughts are always about protecting you and the Empire. But High Chancellor Draven? He thinks about you differently. There's anger there, and resentment. And he keeps thinking about someone named General Cross, and meetings that happen late at night. Vorith went very still. What kind of meetings? I don't know exactly. The thoughts are fragmented when they are not focused. But there are others involved. At least 4 members of your council. They are planning something, and whatever it is, it's not good. The Emperor stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Riley heard the storm of thoughts in his mind. Anger, yes, but also hurt. Betrayal cut deep, regardless of species. I suspected, he said quietly. But suspicion and confirmation are different things. Thank you for telling me, Riley. You may have just saved this empire from tearing itself apart. What are you going to do? For now? Nothing. If I act too quickly, I might miss the full scope of the conspiracy. But I'll be watching. And you, my unlikely friend, will help me listen. Riley realized what she was hearing in his thoughts: trust. Real, genuine trust. This alien emperor, who ruled over territories spanning dozens of star systems, trusted her. A maintenance worker from Earth who'd stumbled into his throne room by accident. I won't let you down, she promised. Vorith turned back to her, and for the first time, she saw him smile without any of the weight of his position behind it. Just a simple, honest smile between friends. I know you won't. That's why I asked. Over the following days, Riley became more than just a curiosity or a scientific anomaly. She became the Emperor's confidant, his early warning system against deception, and perhaps most importantly, his friend. She taught him about human customs, made him laugh with stories from Earth, and helped him see his empire through different eyes. And Vorith, in turn, showed her a side of galactic politics and power that few humans would ever witness. He valued her perspective precisely because it was so different from everything he'd known. In the quiet moments between state business and conspiracy hunting, Riley realized something strange and wonderful. She'd found her place in the galaxy, and it was sitting across a dinner table from the most powerful being in known space, sharing stories and honest conversation. Sometimes the most important friendships were the ones nobody saw coming. The state dinner was the biggest event Riley had ever attended. The grand hall sparkled with thousands of lights, and delegates from across the empire filled the massive space. Riley felt completely out of place in the formal dress the palace staff had given her. She was used to maintenance jumpsuits, not flowing fabric that cost more than she made in a year. Emperor Vorith had insisted she attend, despite her protests. You're my guest, he'd said firmly. And more importantly, you're my eyes and ears. If Draven is planning something, it will likely happen when I'm surrounded by crowds and distractions. Now, standing near the Emperor's table, Riley understood why he'd been worried. The thoughts around her were overwhelming. Hundreds of minds, all thinking at once, creating a noise in her head like standing in the middle of a busy highway. She'd learned to filter most of it out over the past weeks, but tonight everything felt sharper. More intense. High Chancellor Draven sat 3 seats down from the Emperor, looking perfectly composed. His crystalline face reflected the light in pleasant patterns, and he smiled at all the right moments during the speeches. But Riley could hear his thoughts, cutting through all the mental noise like a knife. Just a few more minutes. Stay calm. Everything is in place. Riley's heart started pounding. She caught Vorith's eye and gave a slight nod, their agreed-upon signal that something was wrong. The Emperor's expression didn't change, but she heard his thought clearly, understood. Stay close. The servers began bringing out the main course, elaborate dishes that Riley couldn't identify. She watched Draven carefully, trying to pick up more details from his thoughts. What she heard made her blood run cold. The human will be blamed. Poor thing won't even see it coming. 2 problems solved at once. Riley's mind raced. They were going to do something during the dinner, and somehow she was going to be framed for it. She needed to warn Vorith, but how? They were surrounded by hundreds of guests and council members. If she caused a scene now, she might trigger whatever Draven had planned. Then she saw it. One of the servers approaching the Emperor's table had thoughts that didn't match his calm exterior. His mind was screaming with nervous energy, don't mess this up. Deliver the plate. Get out. 20 seconds. Just 20 seconds. Riley moved without thinking. As the server reached for the plate meant for Emperor Vorith, she stepped forward and accidentally bumped into him. The plate crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. The entire hall went silent. "I'm so sorry," Riley said loudly, trying to sound clumsy rather than deliberate. "I didn't see you there, I was just—" "Seize her." Draven's voice rang out across the hall. "The human just attempted to poison the Emperor." Guards rushed forward immediately, grabbing Riley's arms. She struggled, trying to explain, but Draven was already standing, addressing the shocked crowd. "Your Majesty, I warned the Council that allowing this human such close access was dangerous. She's clearly been working with rebels in the outer territories. That plate she just destroyed contained poison meant for you." Riley heard his real thoughts underneath the performance. "Perfect. The analysis will show trace amounts we planted earlier. She'll be executed by morning." "That's not true," Riley shouted. "The server, check the server. He's the one who—" But the server was already gone, disappeared into the crowd of panicked staff and guests. Riley could hear his thoughts growing fainter as he fled. "Made it out. Payment better be worth this." Emperor Vorith stood slowly, his face unreadable. Riley's heart sank as she heard the conflict in his thoughts. He wanted to believe her, but the evidence looked damning. She destroyed the plate herself. There were hundreds of witnesses. "Take her to the holding cells," Vorith said, his voice heavy. "We'll investigate this properly." As the guards dragged Riley away, she caught fragments of Draven's triumphant thoughts. Phase 1 complete. Now for the Emperor himself. Without his little human spy, he's vulnerable. The holding cell was cold and bare, nothing like her comfortable guest quarters. Riley paced back and forth, trying to think. She could hear guards outside, their thoughts a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Some believed she was guilty. Others weren't sure. None of them were going to help her. She had to get out. Not just to save herself, but because Draven wasn't done. Whatever he'd planned, attacking the Emperor was the next step, and it was going to happen soon. Riley closed her eyes and concentrated, pushing her awareness outward. If she could hear thoughts, maybe she could map out where people were. The guards outside, 2 of them. More guards down the corridor. And further away, in what must be the main hall still, a cluster of familiar thought patterns. The council members, including Draven. His thoughts were clearer now, focused and sharp. Security is occupied with the human. Guard rotation changes in 10 minutes. The Emperor will retire to his private chambers. That's when we strike. 10 minutes. Riley had 10 minutes to escape, find the Emperor, and stop an assassination. She looked around the cell desperately. The walls were solid, reinforced metal. The door had an electronic lock. But there, in the ceiling corner, she saw it. A ventilation grate. Small, but maybe just large enough for a human to squeeze through. Riley smiled despite everything. She'd spent 6 months crawling through ventilation systems. This was something she actually knew how to do. She dragged the cell's bench under the grate and climbed up. The screws were tight, but she'd learned a trick during her maintenance days. She pulled off one of her fancy shoes and used the heel to pound at the grate's edge until the screws loosened enough to pull free. The guards outside heard the noise. What's she doing in there? Riley didn't wait to find out what they'd do. She pulled herself into the ventilation shaft just as the cell door opened. A guard's confused shout followed her, but she was already crawling as fast as she could through the narrow passage. The thoughts around her became her map. She followed the Emperor's distinctive mental signature through the maze of shafts, taking turns based purely on where she sensed his presence. Her fancy dress tore, her knees scraped against metal, but she kept moving. She emerged in a corridor just outside the Emperor's private chambers. 2 guards stood at the door, but Riley could hear other thoughts nearby. Hidden thoughts, shielded ones. Draven's conspirators, waiting in the shadows. Riley dropped from the shaft with far less grace than she would have liked, landing in a heap in front of the surprised guards. "The Emperor," she gasped. "He's in danger. Draven's people are here, they're going to." One of the guards grabbed her arm roughly. "You're supposed to be in a cell." But the other guard, the younger one, hesitated. Riley heard his thought clearly. She sounds terrified. And why would she come here if she was guilty? That moment of hesitation saved all their lives. From the shadows, 3 figures emerged, weapons raised. But Riley's warning had given the guards just enough time to react. What happened next was chaos. The corridor erupted into violence. Energy blasts lit up the hallway as the guards returned fire against Draven's assassins. Riley dove behind a decorative pillar, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. She'd never been in a firefight before. Maintenance workers didn't train for this kind of thing. "Riley." Emperor Voritha's voice came from inside his chambers. The door slid open and he stood there, looking more alert than surprised. Get inside, now. Riley didn't need to be told twice. She sprinted across the corridor as energy blasts sizzled past her head, close enough that she felt the heat. Vorith pulled her inside and sealed the door behind her. How did you escape? He demanded, but Riley could hear relief in his thoughts underneath the stern tone. Ventilation shaft. Your Majesty, Draven's going to. I know. Vorith moved to a hidden panel in the wall and pulled out what looked like a weapon. After you were taken, I had Counselor Brent do a deep scan of everyone at the dinner. We found the truth. Draven has been planning this coup for months. At least 6 council members are involved, plus General Cross and half the palace guard. The door shuddered as something hit it from outside. Through the chaos of thoughts, Riley could hear Draven's voice, both spoken and mental. He was out there now, directing his people personally. Your Majesty. Come out and this can end peacefully. Surrender your throne and I'll allow you to live in exile. The Empire needs new leadership, someone not weakened by sentiment and attachment to lower species. Voritha's jaw tightened. He means you. You're the attachment that proved I was unfit to rule. That's insane, Riley said. You're the best leader they could have. You actually care about people. Caring is seen as weakness in galactic politics. Vorith checked his weapons charge. Riley, there's an emergency passage behind that bookshelf. It leads to the hangar bay. I need you too. No way. Riley crossed her arms. I'm not leaving you here alone. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Riley could feel tears of frustration building. You're my friend. And friends don't abandon each other when things get hard. That's like the whole point of friendship. Another impact rocked the door. Cracks were forming along the edges. They had maybe a minute before Draven's people broke through. Riley closed her eyes and focused on the thoughts outside. There were 12 attackers total, including Draven. But she could also sense the 2 loyal guards still fighting, and further away, Counselor Brent racing toward them with reinforcements. They just needed to buy time. The ventilation system, Riley said suddenly. Your Majesty, can you access the palace controls from here? Vorith moved to a console on his desk. Yes, but what good will that do? I spent 6 months learning every duct, shaft, and passage in this station. If you can override the emergency protocols, I can vent the atmosphere in this corridor. Not enough to kill anyone, just enough to knock them out for a few minutes. Voritha's eyes widened. That's brilliant. But you'd need to manually trigger it from the maintenance junction, and that's outside this room. I know where it is. I fixed a leak there 2 weeks ago. Riley was already moving toward the bookshelf. Give me 30 seconds after I leave, then hit the override. Riley, if you're out there when the atmosphere vents. I know. I'll hold my breath. I'm human, remember? We're good at surviving stupid situations. Before Vorith could argue further, Riley slipped through the emergency passage. It was dark and narrow, but she'd navigated worse. She could hear Draven's thoughts growing more agitated, the door's about to give. Once we're inside, kill the Emperor quickly. Make it look like the human did it before we stopped her. Riley emerged from a side panel 3 meters down from where the attackers were focused. The maintenance junction was right there, a small access port that most people would walk past without noticing. She popped it open and found the manual override, exactly where it should be. Through the walls, she heard the Emperor's chamber door finally give way. Draven's people rushed inside, weapons ready. Riley pulled the override lever. Warning klaxons blared. Emergency lights flashed red. And then the atmosphere evacuation system kicked in with a sound like a massive wind tunnel. Riley dropped to the floor, pressed her face against the cool metal, and held her breath. The corridor became a vacuum chamber. Through her fading consciousness, Riley heard the confused thoughts of Draven's people turn to panic, then fade to nothing as they collapsed. 20 seconds. 30. Her lungs burned. 40 seconds. Black spots danced in her vision. Then fresh air flooded back as Vorith reversed the system. Riley gasped, pulling oxygen into her starving lungs. Footsteps thundered around her as Counselor Brent and loyal guards secured the unconscious attackers. Strong hands helped Riley to her feet. Emperor Vorith looked shaken, which was probably the first time she'd ever seen him look anything other than composed. That was the most reckless, foolish, brilliant thing I've ever witnessed, he said. His thought echoed, I could have lost her. This brave, ridiculous human who saved my life. Riley managed a weak smile. Did it work? See for yourself. Draven lay unconscious, his hands already being bound by guards. The other conspirators were similarly restrained. It was over. The following hours were a blur. Medical scans to make sure Riley was okay. Statements and reports. The arrest of every conspirator, including the council members who'd betrayed their oaths. By the time dawn broke over the station, Riley was exhausted but safe. 2 days later, Emperor Vorith summoned her to the throne room. The same place where this had all started, when she tumbled out of a ventilation shaft and claimed to hear thoughts. Riley Chen, Vorith said formally, with the full council in attendance. You have served this empire with courage and loyalty that exceeds most of those who were born into it. I can offer you anything you desire. Wealth, titles, a position on my council, estates on any world you choose. Name it, and it's yours. Riley thought about it. She could hear the expectations in the council members' thoughts. They assumed she'd ask for power or riches. That's what people did when given this kind of opportunity. I want the maintenance workers to have better pay and conditions, Riley said. Real breaks, safer equipment, respect from the supervisors. A lot of them are humans like me, working hard jobs that keep this whole station running, and nobody even notices them. She could hear the surprise ripple through the council's thoughts. And I'd like to go home sometimes. To Earth. To see my family and remind myself where I come from. But I'll come back. If you still want me here, I mean. Vorith's expression was impossible to read, but his thoughts were crystal clear, of course. How perfectly, wonderfully human. Granted, he said aloud. All of it. Furthermore, I'm establishing an official embassy on Earth. Humanity has proven itself worthy of full recognition in the galactic community. And you, Riley Chen, will serve as our liaison between species when you choose to return. The weeks that followed changed everything. Earth got its embassy and formal protection under imperial law. The maintenance workers got their improved conditions and triple the pay. High Chancellor Draven and his conspirators faced justice. And Riley? She went home for 2 weeks, hugged her family, ate her mom's terrible cooking, and told her little brother stories about space that he absolutely refused to believe were real. When she returned to the station, it wasn't as a maintenance worker but as an honored guest and friend of the Emperor. She kept her modest quarters by choice and still wore comfortable clothes instead of fancy robes. She ate dinner with Vorith every week, sharing stories and honest conversation. One evening, several months after the assassination attempt, Vorith asked her a question. Do you ever regret it? That day you fell into my throne room? Your life would have been simpler if you'd stayed anonymous. Riley thought about it, really thought about it. My grandma used to say that sometimes the best things in life come from the biggest accidents. I think she was right. She could hear his thought, warm and genuine. The universe brought me a friend when I needed one most. What a strange and wonderful gift. What are you thinking about? Riley asked, even though she already knew. Vorith smiled. I'm thinking that humanity's greatest strength isn't technology or military might. It's your ability to see people as people, not as positions or power. You taught me that. A maintenance worker who became the most trusted advisor an emperor could ask for. Riley raised her cup in a toast. To unlikely friendships. To unlikely friendships, Vorith echoed. And to the human who proved that sometimes the most extraordinary abilities come in the most unexpected packages. Outside the window, Earth hung in space, a blue marble among the stars. Riley had found her place in the galaxy, not through grand ambitions or special powers, but through simple kindness, courage, and the very human quality of caring about others. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. Or in this case, an entire empire.